Are those constitutional and other protections still relevant in the digital era? Has the digital era really turned them upside down?
It's absolutely still relevant. So definitely we have new technologies, things like the internet, social media, that's changing how we can speak, how we can protect ourselves. Data privacy is drastically changing the way we expect privacy protections. But it's still relevant to think of these constitutional and other protections. I mean, we still care about keeping some things secret from others. We innately understand this. So no matter where we go technologically, I think privacy will always be relevant in some form or another.
Mr. Garcia-Ruiz, how do privacy issues impact you in the media? How do you see them? How do you experience them?
Every day and everything. Can I just say that I, too, like to take my snacks and eat them away in the corner, but I do that so my wife won't see me eating the snacks. So that's privacy. I have a right to privacy when I eat my snacks by myself, constitutionally guaranteed. All right, I'm going to write that down. Privacy is a very fluid concept in the media, and I'll give you just a couple examples. There's the first one, which is a person a public figure or is a person not a public figure? And so there's two different sets of rules, how we look at that. So there's, right now we're dealing with a story about a pretty major figure. Let's go to Dianne Feinstein and the fact that she was going through the dementia symptoms as a U.S. senator. Do we publish that or do we not publish that? It's a very private issue, right? But it affects her performance in a very public space. So that was one we really wrestled with, and at the end of the day, we did publish because we thought the scope of the ailment was becoming so big that it was affecting actually the United States government. But where we see it now much more is in a kid who has 100,000 followers on Instagram. Is that a private person or a public person? Are the statements made by that person on social media private or public? And there's a lot of argument right now about that. And a lot of this law, I don't think, has actually been settled. We live in a world now where you are encouraged to share all aspects of your life. I once was told by an employee, if there's a controversial moment on Twitter and I don't comment on it, I'm actually making a statement by not commenting. So I have to get out there and I have to comment. So everything is sort of flipped over the last 20 years. And so what is a private statement and what is a public statement now really depends on a case-by-case basis, the individual involved, with us leaning on that public figure argument as much as we can, but it's really hard sometimes.
Can you define who is a private person at this point when everybody's on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, et cetera? I mean, from your standpoint in terms of coverage, who would you consider a private person?
I think the majority of residents of San Francisco living their daily lives, I would consider private citizens. And then there's another level above that are super active either in local government or on social media. What do you do with someone who's posting on Nextdoor 10 times a day, right? Is that person now a public figure? So you have the majority of folks who are private. Then you have this gray area of people who are making themselves public. And by the way, what winds up happening is when you make yourself public and you're not prepared for the backlash of making yourself public, then you got to make yourself private again. And that's really hard to do because the internet is, forever. You publish something, it's staying forever. So you have that group, and then you have the people who are clear public figures who comport themselves in a way where they know that any action they take is fair game for people to report on.
Can you give an example, you don't have to use names or anything, of when you didn't publish something because it was a private piece of information?
So what we see more of now is people who 5 years ago gave an interview to the Chronicle and now have decided that they don't want that interview to be printed anymore. We get a lot of requests for people to take things down that are already up. 10 years, 15 years. We have a woman who reached out last week. I think the story was 18 years ago, and wants now to become public, or wants now to become private. All of those are really tricky. Our general rule is when something is published and it's part of our publishing record, we don't take it down. We have very strong laws against that. But there will be times, one of the most difficult ones was I was 18 years old. I was having issues, let's say 21 years old. I was having mental health issues at the time. I took part in a study. As taking part in that study, I gave interviews about my mental health issues. Now they're 35 years old, and that, every time you Google their name, is what pops up. What do you do about that? And so we get those every day.
Smita, how does Zoom experience privacy issues of dividing lines, and how do you generally approach the broad issue of privacy?
Hello? Yes? No? Not yet? Yeah. Okay, awesome. Okay. So, privacy, in terms of how we think about it, I think it is it's pretty much interwoven now into all aspects of product development and how we operate and how we communicate. So privacy, and I've seen that this change over the last maybe 7, 8, 10 years, where there's been a lot of awareness of users wanting privacy, companies wanting privacy. There's a variety of laws. I mean, Europe started with GDPR and those things, which I think are actually really good. So, but from a Zoom point of view, whenever any product is being developed, and I run the product teams have to really think about privacy by design. And what privacy by design means is thinking through all aspects of user data, customer data, because often our users are companies, but those companies have a lot of employees. We also have a lot of users who are consumers, but you have to think through all of those aspects, and you want to make sure that you're really protecting the data and you're providing clarity on how the data is being used. So we have terms of service that we publish. We update them every time our products change. We look at that from all angles. There are times, for example, some of our features, one feature we recently started an open beta on, it's called smart name tags. And what smart name tags lets you do, like you're in a conference room, there are 10 people are virtual, you can get a name tag associated with each person in the room, and intelligent technology can separate people out. So it's a much more engaging conversation. Otherwise, you end up with a set of people clustered at that end, and it's really hard to distinguish them. But in order for that kind of information, the user is completely in control. They decide if they want us to do that or not. They may choose to let us use their information, like a photo. If so, they upload it. And if they don't want it, they can delete it anytime. It's very visible. It's shown to them. So this is just an example of one product which came out recently, but we think of that across all our products all the time, and they go through privacy reviews, and they are approved to go out, and we make sure that our communication is very transparent.
Thank you. So privacy is much less existent than it used to be in the past, obviously. Let me ask you, Professor Li, what does that mean for democratic engagement, for society as a whole? What's the impact of that?
Well, I talked earlier about how you need to have privacy for speech. You need to be able to feel like you can safely, say, go to a protest or go to a political meeting or write a political opinion, right? And it's true. I think now in this new environment, it's harder to protect that kind of privacy. So the fear is there might be a chilling effect. Maybe some people feel less free to speak openly. But I do think that there are more techniques available. People are still able to, say, post an anonymous letter or use an anonymous or pseudonymous account to write something. There are still ways to protect your privacy, but it really becomes more about every individual having to fight a little bit for that privacy. So one thing I think we can do, obviously legislative fixes, but also on the product side, building in the protections so that we don't have to do it one by one individually, right? Something so that the whole entire population is protected.
So that would be, for example, when you're on a social media platform, there is the option to post anonymously. I mean, what would be examples of that?
One example, allowing people to post anonymously, right? That helps a lot. You don't have to tie your opinion to your name. When I worked at the Wikimedia Foundation, there were many issues with people writing things, even on Wikipedia, right? A relatively neutral encyclopedia, writing things that were political in nature, writing a biography of a politician, for example. And here in the US, we assume we've got some level of First Amendment protection, but that's not necessarily the case everywhere. So there were many times when we'd run into issues with people who would say, look, we are actually at risk. We can only publish these things if we are able to have an anonymous account. So platforms allowing anonymity or protecting anonymity helps. Encryption, right? Stronger encryption standards, that helps a lot. I know Zoom has been doing some work on this as well. So all these technical fixes are things that the industry can do in addition to government regulation on privacy.
Let's talk about data collection for a moment. Two levels, corporate data collection and government data collection. For companies, what should be the boundaries, what should be the guiding principles for collecting and utilizing data about customers and constituents and clients and so on? Smita, yes.
So I can, from a company point of view or from a corporation point of view. So when we think about data, I think the customer, the user, they always have to know what data you're collecting. They should have a right to be able to manage that data in very, very transparent ways, and they should always be able to make choices around that data. When we think about data, there's some amount of data you need to operate the service. Like, if Zoom is connecting over video, you need to know a little bit about, how do you actually provide that service if it goes down. So there's some essential data to manage that service, but even that needs to be done very transparently. But on top of that essential data, there's a lot of data which is not essential. So, one thing, for example, there's so much talk of artificial intelligence, generative AI, and there's so much discussion around what data to use or not use. And that's something which we thought about very, very deeply. We launched our assistant, we call it AI Companion, last year. And all kinds of conversations happen on Zoom. I mean, we feel so fortunate, and there are multi-party conversations that happen. And we wanted people to have a lot of comfort with those. So we took the position, even as we launched it, we went in saying that we will not use any customer conversation data for training the models, either Zoom's models or we partner with third parties as well. And we said we won't even ask customers for permission to opt into training our models, because that opens up a can of worms. So that is an extreme example of where we said we had to do that because really sensitive conversations happen on Zoom, but frankly, it's also good business practice for us. We want people to have a lot of confidence in Zoom when they're having those conversations. So this is kind of a spectrum of the things which we look at.
You and I chatted briefly. There is Zoom for government, and there are options for classified or semi-classified conversations over Zoom. How do you protect that channel?
So in Zoom, like you mentioned, encryption. So we do provide very advanced encryption. I think we actually even just recently launched encryption. So when quantum computing happens, those keys cannot be broken. So we are very forward-looking on our data protection. But for Zoom for government in particular, we operate them with different server infrastructures. They are managed by people who only have credentials. To manage it, it's a set of people who are authorized to do it. So we make the separation pretty like very, very clear. And then also this is reviewed and all of this is approved by government entities who look at it, who examine it on a regular basis, and anything new we put over there, they go and they examine the isolation as well as the implementation to say, yes, it's meeting the standard. So Zoom for Government, I mean, we have to really, we are held to that right bar, and we are, and we hold ourselves to that bar, but I also appreciate that there's scrutiny to make sure that, that we and everyone else is being held to that bar.
Government collects a lot of data. And you, Mr. Garcia-Ruiz, are on the front line of the media and trying to make sure that whatever should be, whatever protections there should be from, say, overweening government power, et cetera, are protected. Are you at all concerned about the collection of data and use by government agencies that comes from the digital platforms?
I think you'd have to be an idiot not to be, right? I mean, there is no doubt that, look, at the end of the day, everybody's individual data is incredibly valuable. It's very simple. Google did not exist, say, 20 years ago. If you wanted to buy, and if you were an advertiser or a company, you wanted to advertise, you bought an ad in a print product, the advertisement went, the publisher told you 1 million people have seen this ad, you paid based on how many people might have seen it. Google has effectively wiped out the news industry and the magazine industry because they sell a targeted advertisement. You want a 36-year-old woman who works for the Defense Department and has 2 kids and drives a Subaru to look at your ad, we can deliver that to you. Well, how do they deliver that? They deliver that because when you go into Google and you look at those terms of service that none of us ever read, it's just true, we just don't. I don't think I've ever even read a Zoom term of service, and I'm on Zoom all the time. And so you agree to give all that up, and it's incredibly valuable for Google to be able to monetize your personal information. In that case, I think we make a deal. The deal we're making is, Google, you're going to give me free search, you're going to give me free Google Docs, you're going to give me free Google Sheets, you're going to give me free Google whatever maps, and in exchange for that, I'm going to give you my data. Microsoft, I have to pay to use Microsoft Word. Google, you are free. That's the deal we are making. Where it gets tricky, and some people are okay with that, and if you're not, then you use, I guess, DuckDuckGo or one of those other ones, right? But with the government, it's completely different. With the government, there is this sort of gray area where, in the name of national security, all kinds of data is being collected in the name of national security. And the truth is, we have very little idea what it is. Every 2 or 3 years, there'll be some massive leak, right? There'll be a wiki leak or something like that, where usually a software engineer working for the government will be horrified by how much data is being collected, and they'll go to the media and they will leak it, and then there'll be some reforms, hearings, but then it turns up again. So we have no idea what the government is collecting on us. I am still mystified how having the world traveler thing without telling the government, when I get to the airport and I swipe, they know I've been out of the country. Well, wait, what? How do they know that I'm actually been out of the country, right? So there's things like that go on all the time now. Some good, but we really worry about the nefarious stuff. And where it gets really bad is in foreign countries that are using these tools against their citizens. The Philippines is a great example of a country, a very sophisticated government that has turned technology against its people to kill democracy, to kill free speech.
Just to pursue that a little bit further, this country is under attack from other powers in the world, particularly our critical infrastructure, trying to find ways in, and there's also cybercrime from abroad, including government-sponsored cybercrime. So isn't it good at some level that data is available to the government to protect us? It's our water systems, our sewer systems, our electrical grid, not to mention the private cybercrime that's going on towards individuals. Isn't there a value to that from protecting our national security?
Yeah, and I think most of us would agree, right? I think what we all want to know is where's the line that they're drawing? What are they? Are they listening into my Amazon Echo when I'm at home? Or where is that line? And obviously, some of us are more valuable than others to the government in terms of learning about what they're doing. How are they deciding who's valuable and who isn't? All this is a very opaque thing done in the name of national security, and it's terrifying. And then the other little problem is the government's inability to actually properly keep this data from being stolen. We see leak after leak after leak. I mean, this ginormous credit leak that happened, last month, where all of our data, including our social security numbers, is now on the dark web somewhere. So it's not just the collection, it's the protection. We don't know anything about how they're protecting our data.
Professor Li, in this environment, are new legislative vehicles to protect privacy needed? And if so, what? And what's in the works in terms of Congress and state legislators protecting privacy?
Well, we're fortunate in California to have a relatively strong state privacy law. So we were the first to do this, and a number of other states have followed since. In lieu of a strong federal privacy law, at least we have protections in the state. So you have protections if you opt out of data collection from a website, right? They're not allowed to use your data. You can request deletion of your data. There is transparency involved. We need something like that for the nation. We need to not be given different sets of rights for different states for something as intrinsically valuable as privacy. I'm definitely in favor of having a national privacy law, not only to protect each of us as citizens and individuals, but also because pretty much every other country, every other jurisdiction already has privacy regulation. And we are really behind on this, to the point where it's a little embarrassing, I think. We're talking about America as this bastion of civil liberties, right? We're the freedom country, and yet we don't have a national privacy law. So that's something that we definitely have to work on, and something that Congress could eventually pass, though they have tried, parties have tried over the years, over and over again. Eventually we'll get there. Someday we'll get that national privacy law.
Give us an example of a country that has an effective national privacy law. What does it say? What does it do? What's the experience been?
Well, I believe we already talked about the GDPR. So the European Union has their general data protection regulation, probably the strongest data protection regulation for any jurisdiction right now. And this gives individuals a number of different rights. Primarily, what it does is tell companies, you cannot collect data unless you've gotten the consent of the consumer, or you have a set of specific limited purposes that are legitimate. That's really powerful, right? That switches things. Right now, we have this model where you can opt out of certain things. You can request data deletion. You can say no to trackers. In Europe, they have a model where you have to opt in, where the default is privacy protection. So that's really powerful. And I think we've seen a lot of companies change their practices, not just in Europe, but worldwide due to this shift. So that's something we could see here too.
Ms. Hashim, you mentioned the AI era and Zoom introducing its AI assistant. How should you talk to your company, your consumers about privacy, your customers? How should companies in general interact with their customers about privacy?
Specifically in this era of generative AI, which personally to me is super exciting. I think we are living in such exciting times technically because flexible work is really normalized, and then now we have generative AI. Flexible work is great, but it also introduces a lot of noise, and generative AI is able to do some amazing things in order to help you manage that noise. But I think the way, and we work with so many companies of all different sizes, and they really care about making sure that they have choices and the data is not used for training these models, so there isn't any accidental leakage. I talked about we don't use the data for training, but even in terms of using our generative AI assistant, we call it AI companion. Companies have complete control at the aggregate level, whether they turn it on or they don't turn it on. They also have control at the individual feature level. So you can decide, I want to use it in meetings or not. Within meetings, can I let people just summarize, like my company or my employees, or can they ask questions? If they're asking questions, do I let people ask questions only from the time they join the meeting? How about if they're external attendees joining? So the amount of the detail, the thought, which we try to put into it and really give our customers the choices. We work at that very hard. And then on top of that, any of the assets that are created, customers have controls over that too. My meeting transcript, how long is it retained? How long is the recording retained? What, where can they be used? So that's the kind of the gamut of choices. It's sometimes a lot of choices to work through. So we also have to think about the complexity of those choices, but the choices are there. And we have financial institutions, we have governments, we have I feel like such complex and highly regulated businesses use Zoom. And they also make sure that we offer those protections. Like we have customers advise us as well, and they say, well, here you forgot to introduce this, and and we take advice from them. We continue to evolve.
Is there any industry-wide standard or mechanism for developing standards about how companies should provide options and should protect customers' privacy?
So in terms of, we have all talked about GDPR, which provides one framework. I think there's also SURF, which is more on the Dutch side, which also provides.
What is that?
SURF. It started in, it's a Dutch law. I'm not the expert, but but they are they have really gone very deep on that. So I think there's frameworks in terms of AI itself. Maybe Tiffany, you will know more, but there are governments thinking about developing frameworks, and some of those have started to come in. But I think we have seen some really good discussions around thinking about the amount of risk and bringing that into play as part of providing guidance. So it's beginning to see some of those discussions. But what we are doing at our end is really proactive, and it's really thinking about how we can be thoughtful of our customers and the employees and our consumer users, so that they can continue to work with us in ways that's trustworthy, and and continue to and they continue to benefit from the products we are developing.
Thank you. And I'm going to encourage audience questions. So we'll start those in just a couple minutes, but be thinking and send them in. And I believe it's through the use of the QR code and then writing your questions down, and then folks are going to read those or introduce those into the discussion. So please get ready. Mr. Garcia-Ruiz, you mentioned the case of someone who had a mental health treatment or services, and that then lives forever online. During COVID, we moved much more towards telehealth. So there's now a potentially vast reservoir of data online about the health of individuals, and in 2023, the FTC fined a mental health platform called Better Health for $7.8 million for sharing mental health data about their customers. What are the potential protections that could be put in place to prevent all of this health data from being available, which is another norm? We have a norm that individuals' health data is private and protected.
Again, it's terrifying. Your health data is incredibly valuable. Your insurance company wants to know how many times you're going to the doctor, how many times you're doing X, Y, and Z, right? So then they can adjust your rates. We're living in a state now where people are losing their home insurance because insurance companies are using these factors that nobody quite understands to assess risk, and then cutting people's policies off, right? One of the things out there is that State Farm is flying drones over houses looking for a certain type of roof, and if that house has a certain type of roof and they tie it to your house, and you own that house and you have a State Farm policy, they're going to cancel you. And they're never going to tell you that they flew a drone over your house and it's because of your roof. They're just going to cancel you. The same thing is possible in healthcare, right? Imagine an employer who's about to hire a high-level executive and they can hit a button and get that high-level executive's health records. And all of a sudden they're, well, you know, this guy had, 2 heart attacks. Well, perhaps maybe not. Or this woman had, cancer a few years ago. Imagine the impacts at a lower level if employers can look at your records and make decisions about how much you're going to cost them in insurance payments, right? So if you have a long history of health problems, maybe I don't hire you because I know you're going to cause my insurance premium for the company to go up. It all comes down to individuals reading terms of services. Unfortunately, we never do. And a lot of people are signing off on things that they're unaware of. I go back to one of the more outrageous ones that the media uncovered was, every new car pretty much has a computer on board. And that computer is tracking all kinds of data. And GM was caught by a journalist selling that data to car insurance companies, and then car insurance companies were raising rates based on how you were driving. And so when I bought my car, in what document did all those pages I signed, where did it say that I could give up that data? What wound up happening is that GM pulled back, not because there was less value to the data, but because of the public outcry. So what we have now is company takes data, finds a business for data, and the judge and jury of it is usually the general public, and the general public will either learn about it and be outraged or learn about it and be okay. Remember when we all found out that Google was reading your Gmails? That was 5-6 years ago. People realized that if you talked about a carpet, I need to buy a carpet, soon you were getting Google ads for carpets. And we kind of decided, that's okay, right? And so now that continued. But this is the type of regulation we have now, absent of any national laws. It really is a situation where a lot of companies are asking for forgiveness, not for permission, and that's where the danger lies, I think, for public citizens.
Professor Li, what types of greater protections are needed, legislatively or otherwise, to protect health data? I mean, we have laws on the privacy of health data.
We do have laws for health privacy. So we have HIPAA, which is the main health privacy law that is the reason why you get those disclosures when you go to your doctor's office, right? The disclosures that I'm not sure if everybody in this room actually reads, but we all sign off on it, right? So we have HIPAA. We have laws even for genetic health. So the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act actually gives you some protections. So insurance companies can't access your DNA data and discriminate against you based on that. We also have just general civil rights law that prevents discrimination based on pre-existing health conditions or disabilities, which is all great. But there is that extra category of data that you were talking about. Data that's not technically health data. It's not coming from your clinic. It's not coming from your doctor. It's not coming from your DNA results. It's data like, what are you shopping for? How are you driving? What roof apparently is on your house? None of that data is clearly included under health data. And yet, all of that data relates to your own health, right? Your shopping habits will show, are you eating enough fresh fruits and vegetables, right? Or have you been shopping for cold medication, maybe? Have you been shopping for pregnancy tests, right? That could be really sensitive health data, especially in some states right now. And that data isn't necessarily protected by existing health laws. So I think what we should do is not just keep the existing health privacy laws, but make sure we have these general data privacy laws that will include all of these kinds of data that could also have health implications.
It is amazing how we're tracked. I just got back last night from a trip to Washington, D.C., and during the very brief time I was there were lots of ads in my feeds about, buying property in Washington, D.C. and the surrounding area. And they knew I was there. So, do we have questions from the audience?
Yes, we have a number of questions that have come
And
in.
I'm not sure that mic is working.
Hello, can you hear me? Is this better? Okay, I'm
Speak
going
up.
to speak up into this mic. So there's a couple of questions. That
Are the
come in.
questions anonymous, or are they? That's
There
a
are
joke.
some anonymous and some have been identified, but we're going to start off with the top voted questions. The first one is a note, this is by Karthika, a note of the generational divide. Younger people are much less concerned about privacy online, but more skeptical about what they read online. Do you agree?
Any takers?
It's a big body of research published this summer by Northwestern that looked at young news consumers, and it was really interesting. There definitely is a different pattern of behavior with digital information among young consumers and older consumers. This is the idea of an influencer, that younger people are far more likely to trust something an influencer says to them, somebody who they follow regularly as an individual as opposed to an institution. Very different. There also is the waves of information that come at you now. The younger generation has found a way to deal with that much more simple. We used to call it multitasking. Now really what it is that young consumers of information know that there's going to be 100 things coming at them, and they have a system for cutting through that 100 and picking certain things. So the distrust, I think, I would guess, is from knowing that there are hundreds of things coming at me every day, and I've decided that I'm going to listen to 3 or 4 of those. And I think that's actually pretty healthy. It's a logical response to what has happened now. The challenge comes in making sure that 2 or 3 people you pick as your sources are actually, benevolent, good actors as opposed to bad actors. There's a great story done by the Post, or I think it was the Post, the Times yesterday, on young people in the Soviet Union who pretty much have all bought in Russia, who have all bought into the Putin basically disinformation campaign. And they amplify the government propaganda, even though it is visibly and clearly a lie. So there is a danger in thinking you've got it figured out, and only trusting a couple of people if those couple of people are not benevolent actors.
Other reactions, comments?
I think it's definitely a new world. It blew my mind when I read the study that said that teenagers are actually searching for news first through TikTok rather than looking at any news site, right? Any newspaper. That is completely foreign to me, even though I also, came of age with the internet. It's a new world. And I think that we need to have a greater emphasis on media literacy, right? Schools need to be teaching, how do you figure out a trusted source? Sure, follow the influencer that breaks down the news for you, right? That's entertaining, that's educational. But make sure you know where to look up those primary sources to check, right? Make sure you understand how to know that the news is actually accurate. And that's something that we can all be involved in. That's something that education should play a part in. It's something that society can play a part in. But at the same time, I also want to push back a little bit on this idea that young people don't care about privacy. We still care about privacy across generations. It's just different. So maybe younger folks are more open to posting online, right? Posting on social media. But they still want to keep some things private. That's why you get the fake accounts, right? The real accounts, and then the ones that you show your parents. So because of that divide, there's a different expectation of privacy. And that's something that we should be considerate of as well. I don't know if lawmakers will be able to quickly adapt to what the teenagers right now are thinking of as privacy. But in the long term, we've got to remember privacy is evolving as well as news information.
Ms. Hashim, any thoughts?
I'm good, Thank you.
Okay. Other questions from the audience?
So an audience member asks, what steps can we take to protect our privacy in the digital age where it can sometimes feel like it doesn't exist?
Response?
I can start. There are a number of things you can do on a practical level. You mentioned DuckDuckGo. So if you want, you can be using applications and tools that are more privacy protective. Instead of Google search, you can use DuckDuckGo. Instead of Chrome or Safari, you could be using Firefox. Instead of, say, WhatsApp, you could be using Signal. Right? There are technological tools you can look at in order to protect yourself online. The Electronic Frontier Foundation, EFF, is a nonprofit, I believe, based in San Francisco, and they do a lot of activism around internet and digital freedoms. So if you check out their website, there are a lot of resources you can look up for how to protect yourself. And that's just on a technical basis, but I'm sure others have ideas for more general privacy protections as well.
I think there may be a panelist on one of the panels from EFF, or already was. So good thoughts. Mr. Garcia-Ruiz.
Clear your damn cookies. Right? Clear your cache. That's a real basic thing. I don't do it enough, but the cache is all the cookies that people are putting on your sites, including the San Francisco Chronicle. So we can serve you. It means you have to put in all your passwords again, but they're collecting a lot more than your passwords and your logins, right? So that is a very basic thing you can do. And your search history, clear your search history on, if you really are going to use Chrome, just go in and clear your search history regularly. Just really basic stuff. And read the terms of service. Do as I say, not as I do on that one.
I think it's really hard. It's really, really, really hard. And the convenience of having your cookies and your history and it remembering who you are, Netflix knowing what you watched, the recommendations, Instacart knowing what you shopped for, it's a huge convenience factor. So, I mean, the kind of things which I would say are more common sense, but still in public discourse, be careful. I mean, you would be careful when you are going out and speaking as a physical human person. You have to bring some of that to your online persona too, and people do it to various extents, but you should do that. A lot of the companies do offer, I do think that some of the tools are amazing, even in sensitive topics. So you have a health issue, you want to get, you want to understand, get more information, you can get an amazing amount of information, but the tools which you use, you can go to incognito kind of tools, and some of them have had mixed history. I agree with that. But you can also go in and you can do granular deletion of your data and your history in order to remove some of those. So I feel like you have to find the right balance. Reading terms of service, I do not know if anyone has achieved that in their life. It's just not possible, right? Unless you're signing a lawyer for a company. But you have to find your, I think common sense, being somewhat technically savvy in deletion, history management, those are some of the practical things you can do.
So we're getting close to the end of our allotted time. I have two quick questions for brief answers. Is democracy and free speech stronger or weaker in the digital era than it was before?
Weaker. I think what we face now is people using free speech as justification for publishing propaganda and lies all over the place. I think if you look at the purchase of Twitter, that was purchased for free speech reasons, and then you look at what the person who purchased Twitter is posting on Twitter, how often are those posts incorrect or propaganda to one side or another, right? It is a grave danger. The bad actors are using free speech to hurt democracy in very, very big ways, and propaganda is alive and well in the United States as it is all over the world.
Professor Li.
I don't know if I agree with that, actually. I mean, I think there are a lot of harms with internet, right? We've seen propaganda, we've seen deep fake videos of elected officials that are posted by the CEOs of major platforms, right? We've seen all of that. But at the same time, the internet and social media has a democratization effect on who can actually be a speaker, for better or worse. Any one of you right now could try to launch a YouTube channel where you become, well, after a lot of work, you become a major influencer shaping democratic discourse. And even not, aside from influencers, there are people who are just able to comment, people who are able to reach information. I think about, pre-internet days. You were limited to what newspapers you subscribed to or what your local library subscribed to. You were limited to what books your local library had, to what people in your community were talking about. If you wanted to hear new ideas that maybe were unpopular in your local community, it was really hard. It was difficult. And now that's much easier. We've got this huge increase in access to information, and that can be really powerful for democracy and free speech. What we have to make sure of is that we're still protecting against the harms. So I do want us to be able to enjoy the internet and speak to each other and communicate and learn from people all around the world. But those harms have to be addressed. And the way we address them might be through corporate solutions, might be through legislative fixes, or it might be social changes that we develop together. But either way, I think right now is not, not the worst time for democracy. It could be, it's a cyclic sort of pattern. I think we still have a lot of room to protect our democratic freedoms, even with the advent of the internet and new technologies.
Thank you, Ms. Hashim.
So I think there's a lot of bad stuff which is happening out there. But some of the things which I personally feel really good about is for the average person to be able to record what's going on just on their cell phones and be able to put it out. That has huge power, and and we have seen some of that happen where things which would have been impossible to, because either you didn't have the technology to record it or you didn't have a forum to post it, and if you posted it, there wasn't a way to amplify it. Now that can lead to a lot of harm too, but I feel like in terms of what it is providing is pretty amazing in terms of power or scrutiny or being able to look at things. The other example which to me personally is very gratifying, and Professor Li touched on it, is the power of education globally through these channels. I mean, Khan Academy, wonderful institution. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people here do. I travel a lot internationally, and it's really incredible for me to see how accessible education is. But like with anything else, I mean, we all have to learn to use the tools for good, and we also have to keep making sure that the laws and protections and privacy, those things are there. But it does require more work from citizens to do this.
And to all of your points about the protections, I saw a very dangerous trope online the other day, which was fact-checking equals censorship. It's like, really? So anyhow, not something to be, obviously the opposite is needed. Fact-checking is so important, and having those original sources. All right, last question. The title of our panel posed a question. Is privacy obsolete in the digital age? Yes, no, maybe? Who wants to start?
No, right? Privacy is definitely not obsolete. We care about it. I would say intrinsically as people, we want privacy. It's a right that we want. And I think that in the law, it's a right we protect through various parts of the law, right? Constitutional law, tort law, contract law, property law. We protect privacy. We care about privacy. The right or the value of privacy is not obsolete. What's in danger is how much we're able to protect this right. And that's something we should be working on. But that value of privacy is something we should still care about and hold very strongly. Because it's a core human right. It's a core individual right. It's a core civil right even. So it's something we should be caring about, even if some of these new technologies create new dangers and new risks.
So privacy cannot be obsolete. I mean, all of us as human beings have a right to privacy. And I do think I do think, like, we talked about media literacy and being able to learn how to protect your privacy. I do feel like that does require, technological tools open up a lot of possibilities, but there is hard work needed in order to make sure that you can protect your privacy. And sometimes, there are certain segments of population who are better informed than others. So I almost feel like, maybe we start seeing some people harmed more rather than less, just because the kind of digital divides that have those continue to also perpetrate in terms of media literacy. So, so I hope we can do more over there, but privacy absolutely has to be there for, us, for our families, for our friends, for everyone.
Last word, Mr. Garcia-Ruiz.
I'll continue in my role as crank on the panel. Privacy in theory is alive and well. I think everybody, if you talk about it, absolutely, we need privacy. I need to have the right to keep my stuff. But I think about those boxes that pop up on websites that say, I accept, I deny. And there's this giant long paragraph, and how many times you just hit I accept just to get the damn thing off the screen, right? Privacy in practice is dead. I used Waze to get here. There's a company whose employees I don't even know who know everywhere I go in my car. Everywhere I go in my car. And I trust the people at Google who have that information because they bought Waze to do the right thing with that information. I'll give you another one. Was it last month? A hedge fund bought basically the material behind, was it 23andMe? Is that what that's called? The 23andMe site. How many people here are happy to hear that a hedge fund owns all the genetic information about all the people who've gone onto that site? Anybody happy about that? What's the hedge fund going to do with that? They're going to do good things with it, right? So I think in practice, privacy is dead. We make this trade. I'm happy trading the beauty of Waze to get me out of traffic for Waze knowing where I am. I'm not so happy. I don't use genetic testing sites, but I'm not crazy about a genetic testing site getting my genetic information and my family information and all that. So I think in theory it's something we believe in, but in practice we give up a lot for the convenience of these great tools that make our lives so much better. But at the end of the day, that's the price we pay for having them.
Each of you in your professions is wrestling with these difficult issues every day in what you do. You're also guarding the barricades for us in the media, in law, in the corporate sector. Thank you for your service in those areas. Thank you for being on this panel. Emilio Garcia-Ruiz, Editor-in-Chief of the San Francisco Chronicle, Smita Hashim, Chief Product Officer of Zoom, and Tiffany Li, Associate Professor of Law, University of San Francisco. Thank you to Georgetown University. Thank you to San Jose State. Thank you to all of the organizers. Thank you to Sandy Unger, my old friend, for sponsoring this wonderful conference. And thank you to our audience. Thanks for the questions from the audience.